Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stefan Spencer, and today we have Daniel Liebeskind with us. Daniel is Chief Product Officer at Everipedia. His background is as a product-oriented software developer focused on creating great user experiences. Daniel has worn many hats, including venture capital investor, software developer, product manager, and startup founder. And he's been building distributed apps since 2017. Daniel, it's so great to have you on the show.
Yeah, great to be on, Stefan. Thanks for having me.
So I do have to disclose to our listeners here that Everipedia is a client. And so we're going to talk a bit about the progress that you guys have made. It's been pretty marked in terms of SEO over the last few months. But before we dive into that, I would love to kind of give our listener an understanding of what the heck Everipedia is and how this little company, which is growing and growing, can actually compete against its arch, I don't know, nemesis isn't the right word, but arch competitor, Wikipedia. So can you give us a quick rundown on Everipedia?
Absolutely, yeah. So happy to do that. So I would characterize Wikipedia, by the way, as not the arch nemesis, but sort of as the founder of this notion of a wiki of information that exists on the internet, right? And the wiki in Wikipedia form has been around for 20 something years. It really has been an incredibly transformative and very, very useful tool for distributing knowledge throughout the world. But it has been very similar, right? It's been the same platform, the same structure, same type of content, the same type of knowledge for the last 20 years. And so what we're trying to do with Everipedia is be more of a knowledge layer that powers humanity's understanding of the world around them. And so, we aim to be the encyclopedia of absolutely everything, rather than just notable things, rather than being very selective about what knowledge is allowed to be accessed via our platform. Instead, we are using a system. We've designed this around a blockchain, which we'll talk about. Partly just to empower the world to collaboratively edit and then curate knowledge in a decentralized way. So where you don't have a very few number of editors that are making the decisions around what type of knowledge and the quality of knowledge that's added, which can be very limiting, right? Because when you have sort of a centralized, a funnel of information coming in, it takes man hours to actually curate all of that knowledge. And so by using a blockchain, we've been able to decentralize all of that curation, all of that editing, and add knowledge from the unknown little city in Nigeria. One of our top editors happens to be Nigerian, and actually we have a whole contingent of Nigerians now adding knowledge to Everipedia that has never before really been accessible or available online at all. So high level, that's what we're trying to do. We're also trying to transform the notion of what a wiki is. So instead of just being right now, we're in a very similar structure to what Wikipedia is, but we are gradually shifting away from just being long form text to having more embedded, rich content. Things like Instagram, Twitter, other social media elements being able to be pulled into your knowledge base around a particular topic. Also, audio files, embedded videos, virtual reality content. The sky's kind of the limit on what kind of knowledge for a particular topic you'll be able to add to a particular wiki topic.
Yeah, that sounds very visionary. And it's funny, that reminds me where we met, which was Abundance 360, a very forward-thinking, forward-looking sort of event where futurists and technologists, investors and so forth all get together and learn about what's coming in terms of AR, VR, 3D printing, nanotechnology, pretty much everything under the sun that is going to be transformative that you might see in a Star Trek episode and it's coming faster than we think. That's what we're learning about at Abundance 360, and that's where we met. So I'm curious, what are you guys seeing as the future of the internet and of like wiki editing and just knowledge transfer, knowledge sharing in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, Abundance 360, I'm a huge fan of futurist thinking and of making sure that you stay a step ahead of this incredible exponential change that is coming. I think that making sure to not just get stuck in your current situation, but actually look to the future is very important. And frankly, that is one of the things that we're trying to do with Everipedia is say, this is where the world is today, but 5 years from now, it's going to have exponentially changed. And so how can we get ahead of that? How can we actually not just get ahead of it for ourselves, but help make sure that it happens and that it happens in the best way possible, right? Yeah. I think it's actually very important for all of us that are in any industry, but especially in the tech space where things are moving so quickly to really drive this change forward and try to drive it forward in a really positive way, because there's a lot of possible outcomes here. So, I think one of the ways that we think about knowledge is, I sort of alluded to this before, but knowledge historically has been sort of held centralized. The quote that history is written by the victors. All of these notions of history being something that is controlled and that is taught via a vector that has a lot of elements of centralization is the way things are now, and certainly the way they've been in the past. I think Wikipedia is an example of the first medium, one of the first mediums where that was changing, right? Instead of an encyclopedia created by one company, now you have an online encyclopedia where anybody can edit, but still, it's being curated by a select few master editors. Well, what we're aiming to do is have the encyclopedia of everybody, of everything, curated by the entire world. And we have one front end that we've built, Everipedia.org, that sits on top of our public API knowledge layer that's built on a blockchain. It's all publicly auditable, immutable history. That's one of the beautiful things with the blockchain is that you basically have this huge open database that anybody can build front ends or mobile apps, anything, and pull information and push information, right? So we actually have an example of a mobile app right now. I don't know that how much I can quite talk about it yet, but we have a partnership with somebody. I say partnership because we are helping them integrate into our smart contracts, actually pull information and push information in. But they're going to have a totally standalone mobile app that already exists, and they're going to use Everipedia content to actually populate the knowledge element of their application, and they're focused on a very niche audience. They're going to enable that niche audience to also be curating content that's related to that mobile app. And so what we're going to find, what we're beginning to see, and what I think is going to happen more and more in the future, is you're going to have these huge public databases, probably on blockchains, with immutable histories where anybody can build front ends or any kind of application that all collaboratively integrate into this big public API layer. And we're starting to see that. It's very exciting. It changes really the fundamental nature of what knowledge is, because it's no longer a finite controlled substance. It's a public utility essentially that everybody can rely on, that everybody can help curate. So I think that's what we're going to see happening very shortly here with knowledge.
Yeah. So some of the founders or kind of early pioneers in the area of open source and free software and just the whole movement of open source, they say that information wants to be free. And that kind of aligns quite well with what you were describing, that we got to decentralize this information, make it more shareable, easier to spread and interoperable, and of course immutable, so it can't be changed, can't be manipulated. One thing that you mentioned that I think we need to explain a little bit more to our listener who's not necessarily super familiar with how the whole crypto and blockchain world works. You mentioned smart contracts. I think we need to explain to our listener what is a smart contract and how is it relevant and important to the marketer?
Yep. So that's a great question. And the easiest way to think about a smart contract really is as a public database that is auditable, right? Anybody can actually look at this public blockchain. It has the smart contracts on there, and smart contracts are algorithmic systems that are created by developers that enable applications to interact with a database in an algorithmic way where all the rules are predetermined, right? So you can actually look at a smart contract. You can determine how exactly it's going to work. You can see all the function calls, what they're going to do, and it's not controlled by one organization. It's not a black box of information. So a lot of companies, as an example, have APIs. Like Facebook has an API, for example. And developers can build on top of Facebook. They can access this API layer, which is a bunch of functions that you can call within your application that do different things. But with APIs that are private, like Facebook's and most APIs that exist, those algorithms and what actually happens when you call a function are private. You don't really know. You can't actually see the code. Facebook has a bunch of docs that they tell you what these things do, but for the most part, they're not really public. They're private APIs that they're giving you access to. You have to often sign up for them. They give you a code. With a smart contract on a public blockchain, it's totally different. It's the same general concept, but all of the function calls, exactly what happens when those are called, all of that is public and very auditable. In some cases, the public can actually help to create those smart contracts or slowly change them. But it's a much more public way of doing things. It's much more transparent, and it really facilitates this notion of, instead of Facebook owning their database and giving you access, with a smart contract with a public blockchain, it's sort of like the entire world owns the database, and you can access that and make changes to the database and access information via the smart contracts, which are programmatic function calls that everybody can see. So that maybe is getting a little specific, but it does, that will help facilitate in the case of knowledge, but in other things as well, sort of the notion that the entire world can be receiving information, but also contributing to these massive blockchain projects.
Gotcha. So, an analogy that just immediately comes to mind, I've never thought of this analogy before, but if you were to compare, let's say, one of those Tyson chicken plants where they're raising the chickens and nobody's allowed in. Big Ag has these ag gag laws that protect them from journalists exposing all the nasty stuff that's happening. So it's all a big black box, right? You can't see anything other than the output that's coming to your grocery store, nicely wrapped. It looks, so nice. And who knows what's happening behind the scenes. So that's like the kind of traditional world, APIs and so forth, give you access to the output, but everything inside is pretty much a black box. Whereas the opposite of that would be like a smart contract, or, in my analogy, an Apple store with glass walls, right? Where you can see inside the building. You know what you're going to get when you walk in. You're going to walk out with your new iPhone or whatever, but you also can see everything that's happening inside. You can see the people hanging out at the Genius Bar, and whether there's a big line or a small line, it's all very open and exposed, transparent.
Yeah. Yeah, and even taking it a step further, in this case, in the Apple Store, there would actually be essentially like rules that are in place for whenever you go in and you stand at the Genius Bar, how exactly is that interaction going to take place? You would know before you even go in there exactly what's going to happen based on the actions that you're going to take. And so it's not just transparent; it's also programmatic and systematic. You pretty much have a guarantee that every time you do one thing, you're going to get a specific result back,
Right.
which is not always the case, with APIs or with programming in general.
Right. So you know in advance, for example, that when you walk into that Apple store, if you walk in before, let's say, 7:30 p.m., you're guaranteed to get seen that same day. Whereas if it's 7:31, the rules say that it's as we can fit you in, or we might be turning you away because we're going to leave at closing time, whether you're
Yeah.
done or not.
And this is getting, maybe a little beyond what we even need to talk about. But one of the problems with this kind of system, I guess first of all, there's a lot of different types of blockchains. There's a lot of different blockchain networks. They all function slightly differently. They have generally the same underlying functionality, but one of the issues that we've seen in the past with smart contracts that your listeners may be aware of is that sometimes with smart contracts on certain networks, you create these systems, you create these rules, and then if you mess it up a little bit, you basically can't change the smart contract. You lock it in, and so the requirement to really, really think through all the possible implications and then master the smart contract and then deploy it is really important. And if you get it wrong, it actually can cost a lot of economic value. There's a very famous hack that happened on the Ethereum blockchain called the DAO hack, and that it basically was like code is law. And because this thing was designed with a slight flaw, somebody was able to expose that, steal a bunch of money, and you essentially can't undo that. In the case of Ethereum, what happened is they forked the network into two things, became Ethereum Classic, which held onto the code is law. Smart contracts are immutable, you can't change them. And then Ethereum, what we know of as Ethereum now, decided that code is not law. You actually can change a smart contract. We're going to undo those transactions on the network. And so that's what Ethereum is. In other blockchains, like we're on the EOS network, it's much easier to upgrade smart contracts. So we can change them. We can fix any kind of vulnerabilities. We can improve our systems over time. That's a lot of what we're doing is continually improving. But each blockchain is different that way.
And so your blockchain is EOS. What does that stand for?
That's a good question. I think that's actually something that nobody besides the creators of it really know. There's even a debate. Is it EOS? Is it EOS? Is it, people call it different things. So it's, from a marketing standpoint, a little bit of a lack of clarity on that.
Oh, yeah. Funny. Okay. And why did you guys choose EOS instead of Ethereum?
Yeah. So, the progression of blockchains, it really started with Bitcoin. It all started with Bitcoin, essentially, in 2009. And Bitcoin is really a store of value. It's relatively slow to process transactions. Transactions are only processed every 10 minutes. The transaction costs are very high. So you can't really build you can't build an application on top of that. First of all, it's actually there's something called Turing completeness, which means that you can build sophisticated programs on top of something. Bitcoin itself as a network is not Turing complete, so you really need a layer on top of it in order to build applications in the first place. Next came Ethereum, which many people have heard of. That's the first smart contract blockchain. It was created by Vitalik Buterin, and it is Turing complete. It's much faster and cheaper to do transactions than Bitcoin was. And it was really built and architected to be for smart contracts, for applications. It led to the initial coin offering craze, the ICO craze of 2017, where companies were raising $300 million in initial coin offerings before they even had a project. And kind of a craze that happened. That's what led to the bubble, which brought Bitcoin up to $19,000 a coin. And Ethereum was successful, but it has a lot of problems with it around scalability. It's much faster than Bitcoin in terms of transactions. It's much cheaper, but it's still not cheap and fast enough to build something like a Twitter or a chat application. And so it's useful. It's being used mostly now as distributed finance. So being able to do algorithmic smart contracts around financial instruments where there's a decent amount of money at stake. You don't need your transactions to happen in 1 second or milliseconds, and you're willing to stomach a little bit of a transaction cost. That's sort of the state of Ethereum. They're actually transforming a lot. They're going to they're really revamping their entire blockchain. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the project. And I'm a supporter of what they're doing. What happened after Ethereum, and really while Ethereum was developing, already people were working on a version 3. And version 3 was not just one smart contract blockchain, it was many of them, right? And a lot of the ICOs and a lot of the initial coin offerings were actually version 3 or version 4 blockchains. EOS was one of them. And so EOS actually raised, I forget if it's three or $4 billion. It was pretty much the most successful initial coin offering that happened. It was done on the Ethereum blockchain. So they actually did their ICO on the Ethereum blockchain. But once the ICO was done, then you converted your EOS tokens for actual EOS mainnet tokens. And a lot of this is probably just jargon to people that don't know what I'm talking about. Apologize for that. But the promise of the version 3 and version 4s is much cheaper transactions. So in the case of EOS, the state right now, there's been some recent upgrades, and so the state right now is that a user basically doesn't have to pay at all for any transactions. Most apps like Everipedia have actually adopted a model where we are just paying for the network costs, and so from a user's perspective, it's basically free to use this. Transactions happen in 100 milliseconds. Somewhere around there, give or take a couple hundred milliseconds, I would say. But it's very fast. We can build things like Twitter on EOS, and transactions for users are basically free. There are downsides. I would say the way that EOS in particular achieves this is by having a fixed number of nodes that actually process the transaction. So in Bitcoin, transactions are processed every 10 minutes. Basically, the whole world is competing to solve an algorithmic problem that makes them the winner, a mathematical problem that makes them the winner, where they get to win creating a block of transactions. All the transactions essentially that have happened in the last 10 minutes get packed into one block. And so it literally just takes 10 minutes for a transaction to be processed because you're waiting for the next block to happen. And it may happen less than that because if you're on minute 7 of the 10 minutes, you may get added to the next block depending on how much you bid in a transaction fee to actually be included. And again, I apologize if I'm going too deep into this stuff, but with EOS, it's happening I forget the exact time, but it's in the millisecond range. Transaction being processed because it's not the entire world competing. It's basically there are 32, 31, something like that. Maybe it's even 21 block producers that are actually adding transactions to the blockchain. What that means is that it is more centralized, right? So if a government, for example, wanted to attack the EOS blockchain in its current form today, it would be easier to do that because all they'd have to do is attack 21 block producers and shut them down. In Bitcoin, they'd have to, wrangle the entire world of nodes, and there are, tens of thousands, 100,000 nodes out there. Really hard to take that down. The reality with EOS, the protection there is that there are backup block producers. So there's another 100 or so that are waiting in the rings. So if somebody gets shut down, another just steps up. And so, there are protections, but there are trade-offs to all these things between decentralization, speed, cost, and a lot of different things.
Right. So when you said that the entire world is kind of creating these blocks in regards to Bitcoin, those are the miners, right, that are trying to make money, trying to mine Bitcoin, and they're doing that by doing these mathematical equations.
Exactly. And they're getting paid in both transaction fees. So when you do a transaction, you pay the fee. But they're also getting paid. Bitcoin is created by the miners. Every 10 minutes, new Bitcoin is created and given to whoever wins. And so right now, it's pretty lucrative. It can be very lucrative to mine Bitcoin. What's happening in May of it's going to be around May of 2020. So it's coming up. There's an event called the halvening, essentially, and it's where the number of Bitcoin that is created and distributed to miners is going to go half. And this algorithmically happens. It happens every few years. And Bitcoin is going to be created for the next 100 years, and then at a very specific date or a very specific block number, which is around a specific date, it's going to stop creating new Bitcoin, and it's going to be totally dependent on transaction fees. So just a fun fact.
Right. So if you're going to get into the Bitcoin mining business, now is probably not the right time. It would have been a few years ago, maybe, or
It's
even
very
earlier.
competitive now. Yeah, it's very competitive. I would say it's hard to get in today.
Yeah, and it's going to be less lucrative once the halvening happens.
It will be less lucrative, but in theory, the price of Bitcoin goes up. My general theory is that Bitcoin is either going to zero because it's not going to be able to afford having people actually mine. It's not going to be robust enough to warrant people mining. And if people don't mine, then the whole system basically collapses. So it either goes to zero because of that, or it's going to be worth a tremendous amount because it will need to be in order to not go to zero, right? Because
Okay.
it either needs to be worth enough that the transaction fees make it worthwhile for miners, or it'll just go to zero. So it's a hugely skewed upside to zero
Okay. Are
from
you,
my that's my opinion.
so you're in this blockchain crypto world. Do you hold Bitcoin?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I mean, I hold small amounts of a lot of the different blockchains. It's really hard to know at this point which network is going to be the ultimate winner. We're sort of the like TCP/IP phase of the internet, which is they're early on, and there were a bunch of different competing protocols. It was hard to know. I think generally, if you have access to the different ones and you sort of see what's happening, you have a chance at being aligned with the right ones. But I'm a big believer in Bitcoin as a store of value. I'm a big believer in Ethereum as a decentralized finance engine. I think EOS and chains like it are actually incredible application layers for building all sorts of really fast, great user experiences on a blockchain. And I see there being a world where all of them can coexist, serving different functions.
yeah, and I find it fascinating that Everipedia actually has its own cryptocurrency. So what was the reason for that?
Yeah, so we have our own token, right? So we're not our own network itself in the strictest sense of the word, but we have the IQ token. We actually did not do an initial coin offering. Instead, we airdropped the tokens. So anybody that was an EOS token holder got distributed IQ tokens proportional to the amount of EOS that they actually held. And so, by being part of the network, you then were given this engine, this utility engine that is the IQ token. The IQ token is a way to enable our users to actually make some money from the platform, but more it's an economic model for helping facilitate the incentives around making edits and then curating content. So whenever you make an edit, you actually have to stake IQ tokens. You have to essentially risk your IQ tokens when you make the edit. If your edit gets downvoted and gets, basically if the community says no, that was a bad edit, you lock up your IQ tokens, essentially lose your IQ token, but really the actual mechanism is you lock it up for a very long time. And then if you make an edit that is approved by the community, you share in IQ that is generated as an inflation periodically. And so you are rewarded economically for making good edits. You're penalized economically for making bad edits. And then the same thing happens on the voting side. So if you vote on the winning side, you're rewarded. And if you vote on the losing side, you're penalized. So it's a mechanism for incentivizing people to make good edits and to curate content effectively. We are exploring other potential models. Just so that because it's interesting. I'm not really ready to talk about those different things, but the bottom line is that we're continually looking to improve the incentive mechanism to really make it easier for people to collaborate and creating using an economic model to drive collaboration is a really good way to actually get lots of people all over the world to participate, to collaborate. A lot of our editors, they're not doing it for the economic incentive. Frankly, right now, the whole crypto market is kind of in a winter right now. We're in a bear market, and so the price of a lot of these things has gone down. You don't make a ton of money by being an Everipedia editor or curator right now. So a lot of our editors are doing it because they really believe in the mission and what we're trying to do. But the economic incentive is there. It does have meaning, and it especially has meaning for the places all over the world that don't have access to a lot of financial resources right now. So I mentioned, that a few of our editors are in Nigeria right now. They make pretty decent money for where they're at. And what's interesting is they're adding knowledge. I mentioned this before, but they're adding knowledge that has never really been available online, right? And so we're incentivizing people in remote locations economically to add knowledge that has never really been part of humanity's knowledge base before, and thereby, creating really a very inclusive encyclopedia of knowledge of everything. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and the IQ token, that's a utility token. Is that what it's
Yeah.
called? So is there another type of token besides the utility token?
Yeah, so there is the security token and the utility token. The utility token is something that actually powers an application. So it's used as a mechanism within an application. A security token is more like traditional equity. And if you follow the crypto market at all, it's actually been very interesting. The battle between whether something is classified as a security token or a utility token has had a huge impact on the market. A lot of the initial coin offerings that were done, if the SEC determined that your ICO was a security token, you actually there's been a lot of issues with that. A lot of people have been getting in trouble with it because essentially it was like you were doing a private placement of equity to a public market without going through any of the regulatory hurdles that you're supposed to go through to protect equity holders. And security tokens, by the way, in the way that they're similar to equity, one way that they can be structured, they can be structured in lots of dynamic ways that are different than equity. So they're much more robust, but essentially you are getting access to the profitability or a percentage of the revenue, some kind of financial underlying of an application or of a company, whereas a utility token is not really access to the underlying profitability. It doesn't really represent equity. Instead, it's used within the application to power some primary functionality.
Yeah, but a utility token can also be traded.
Absolutely, yeah. So there definitely is an economic model around the utility tokens, but their value is derived from the usefulness within an application, whereas a security token's value, both of them can be traded, but a security token's value is determined more by the underlying profitability or some financial aspect that's being passed through to a security token holder. And those tokens represent essentially a share of one of the financial instruments like profitability as equity would be, or revenue, or something like that.
Wow, this is all fascinating stuff. I know we need to get to all the SEO stuff that you guys have been able to accomplish over the last few months, but one last question I'd like to ask on this topic is, do you have any advice for the marketer who's listening and needs to know something tangible, something that is relevant to them that they should be doing to prepare to be more future-proof in the coming years in terms of blockchain and smart contracts and crypto and all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important, even at this stage, to understand at a very basic level what's going on here. And so some of the stuff that we've been talking about is useful. It might have gone over people's head. I'm kind of just flying through things and I'm not presenting it.
This is all good stuff. I think it's fascinating. And even if somebody is in a very traditional, consulting business or whatever, that this is a glimpse into the future and how sophisticated these kinds of businesses that are based on the blockchain, on immutable records, on knowledge sharing and having knowledge layers and all that. This is the future. This is the future for all of us.
And so, Stefan, my biggest recommendation for any professional service really is that there is a huge need for marketers, for user experience, for designers. A lot of the blockchain projects are very engineer focused because engineers get very excited about this sort of thing. And I think for a lot of other people, it is scary maybe, or they don't really understand it. And so they're just kind of waiting to see what happens. But there really is a massive opportunity right now to come in and help people with user experience, with the way that they're doing messaging. So for a marketer, a lot of projects have huge messaging issues right now. They don't clearly articulate what they're doing. A lot of this stuff is kind of complex. It is hard to explain. Having to include that it's a blockchain project when you're explaining what you're trying to achieve from a grand vision, having to explain what blockchain even is in that sort of elevator pitch is hard, right? And so I think there's a huge opportunity for marketers to come in and help the different projects with the essentials from the more traditional tech landscape or non-tech landscape, bringing some of those best practices to the blockchain projects. That's like an immediate term opportunity for a lot of professional services. I know lawyers that are doing that. There's a huge need for that. I'm part of an organization that's very user experience focused. That's how I got involved in Everipedia in the first place. There's an opportunity for those kinds of things: design, marketing, strategy from a high level. I think even like executive leadership, some of these projects need. And there's a decent amount of money out there because a lot of these ICOs did bring in a lot of capital. There's been a drying effect over the last year or two because we're kind of in a bear market, but there's still huge opportunities out there, even in the near term, to get involved. And once you're involved and once you start getting it, then you're part of it, right? It's got a high learning curve at first, but then once you get the underlying stuff, it's just basically a big public database. Yeah. It's not that complicated.
Yeah. So I actually have a friend, Steve Good, he's got a crypto podcast, and one of the things he does is he comes in as like executive for hire to these different blockchain type of companies and helps them grow their business. And so that's his focus.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense, right? So
great. Yeah.
One other thing before we move topics that I thought was interesting and a little curious was this idea of Turing completeness. Now, Turing, named after Alan Turing, the thing that I first think of when I think of Alan Turing is the Turing test, which is when you won't be able to tell that it's actually a computer that you're conversing with. It will fool you. And that day of some sort of AI passing the Turing test is coming fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why is the Turing completeness thing, how is that related, I guess, to the Turing test?
I've actually never looked that up. I'm not sure. I definitely should have. I'm not even 100% sure that they are related. It likely is still related to Alan Turing, but he was, as you might know, he actually was a brilliant programmer.
Yeah.
He's famous for the Turing test. He's also famous for decoding World War II encryption and helping us to win the war. And so, he's one of the first programmers, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually more related to that and to his programming work than to the AI sentientness.
Yeah, gotcha. What was that movie about Alan Turing and the war? I forget. It was a great movie.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but I a lot of my knowledge about Alan Turing is from the movie. So.
Yeah. Oh, it's gonna bug me. Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, The Imitation Game.
There you go.
That's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah. Great movie. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yep.
Okay, so now let's move on to SEO and how you guys have applied some of the stuff that you've learned from me to make really significant gains in your reach and in your traffic levels and so forth. So let's start off by kind of setting the stage. Like, what was the gain that you got over the last few months? Because we've been only working together for 4 months or something like that. And so the first 3 months was focused on an SEO audit, a tech audit, content audit, and a link audit. And you guys were super fast in implementing, really, really impressive, like taking massive action. So I do appreciate that. Thanks. Not every client does that, so it was refreshing. So let's talk a little bit about the results that you got, because it was a leap of faith, really, right? Because that's the thing about SEO is you don't know what the ROI is going to be. You can guess, but it's all just a guess until you actually get there.
Yeah. So Stefan, I'll actually just frame this as and even take a step back and say that it may be a little counterintuitive for a blockchain company to care about SEO. And it's one of the important things I think for people to realize about this industry, or really any emerging tech industry, is that you're still, if you're a consumer application as we are, you still need to have the best practices from the traditional internet in order to succeed. And you can't ignore things like search engine optimization if most of your traffic is coming from Google, as ours is, right? Something like 90% of our traffic is coming from Google, from SEO, and that kind of traffic is incredible because it's free. And especially for a consumer app that doesn't make money off of its users, we're not collecting and selling information about our users, anything like that. And so we can't really pay for that top line traffic. SEO is incredibly, incredibly important. And I think that a lot of emerging technology companies, a lot of blockchain companies, as I was sort of saying before with professional services, it's very easy to say, oh, because we're doing something new and unique and exciting, we don't really need to do SEO stuff. That can be an afterthought. People will be fired up because it's blockchain, because they can make money from it, that sort of stuff. And I think that that's actually a big mistake, to overlook design, to overlook strategy, SEO, all of those kinds of things. And a lot of our traffic. So we're a blockchain company when you're editing and you're curating content, but we have we have over 1.5 million monthly viewers now that are coming and reading content, and most of them predominantly are not then coming and making edits or curating. We are trying to convert them, giving them some calls to action. But most people are just, they're Googling Daniel Liebeskind, and Everipedia is the #2 result, and boom, now they're at Everipedia and they're reading content. So SEO is incredibly important for us. Setting the framing of our engagement with you, we starting about almost a year ago now, we started completely rebuilding. We threw away the old platform, the old Everipedia front end, and even our API layer, and from scratch rebuilt the entire API and made it public, made it much more robust with great documentation, and completely reimagined what Everipedia was going to be, and then redesigned the entire thing, and then built it from scratch using a brand new framework called React. Our previous platform was built in Python, so we're using React. We're excited. We got some great designs. It takes us about 6 months of building to rebuild our whole API layer, our whole front end, implement all the designs, and we launch in June. And what we find is that people are super fired up about our new platform. We're getting a lot of really positive feedback from the community, from the EOS community, from just random readers. We do things like we added intercom for people to engage with us. We added a whole robust chat layer, so we're getting more engagement from people. But what we found was that our traffic was stalling and was actually starting to drop, and we panicked a little bit because SEO is incredibly important for us, and those readers, the number of people that are actually coming, it's creating a lot of value for the platform itself, and we do convert our readers into editors, and so dropping our top of funnel is going to mean that we're going to have less editors. Our platform in general is going to be less relevant, and so. You and I had met at Abundance 360. We had talked about SEO. You had gotten me fired up about it. I knew that. I did a little bit of research around, but I quickly discovered that you were the person I knew that knew SEO the best. So I mentioned to you we were having these problems, and I think we had done some SEO stuff in the past. We've even in full transparency engaged other consultants in the past. But the first conversation that you had with our team afterwards, we debriefed, and everybody was like, okay, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. So let's do the leap of faith. Let's go ahead and do the 3 audits. He can tell us what's wrong, what we can improve, and then from there we can decide whether it makes sense. We'll see the results. We'll decide whether it makes sense to have a longer term engagement. But at very minimum, if you could give us a few actionable things to implement, that's going to increase our traffic. That creates a huge amount of value for us. And so you did the 3 audits. You gave us a pretty really impressive, robust presentations about technical, link, and content. I'd say the technical and the content, really the technical as the first thing, was incredibly important for us. And there were a number of things that just hadn't really occurred to us. We can go through some of those things. I think I have it open here. We have like a checklist of 60 different items that we pulled out of that presentation you gave to us that were all, we ranked in terms of priority, but there was a lot of super high priority stuff that after you told it to us, it's like, oh yeah, obviously we should have a way of internally categorizing our different content and internal linking structure. Things like, the fact that our homepage has so much link juice, we should be using that really valuable real estate to send users to our highly valued pages instead of to just random pages that don't matter to us. Just very obvious things like that. We then, as you said, we got super fired up about it. We actually have a fairly small team for the amount of traffic and the amount of clout we have in our industry. But we have a fairly lean team, but we get stuff done, and we focused on pretty much solely on SEO improvements for like an entire month, and just implemented most of the stuff that we had talked about. And in that time, we started doing that I think we engaged you in early October. Maybe you gave us the recommendations in October. I can't quite remember, but once we started engaging and doing, I guess what happened, I think, is we engaged you in early October. You right off the bat gave us a few things to do that were sort of like, okay, these things are red flag. Do them in parallel while I'm preparing these other presentations, or while I'm preparing the more robust presentation. So we started doing that. I think we saw an increase of probably 10% traffic in that month, and then we fully implemented everything by early November. And in the last month, I think we've more than doubled our traffic now. Since we engaged you, maybe it was 3 months ago, but we really started implementing things in the beginning of October, and we've more than doubled our traffic in that time. So it's been pretty exciting, and it feels like we are on an upward trajectory. There was one big thing that we weren't able to do yet that we've been working on, which is converting everything over to server-side rendering. So that's something that's coming out very soon for us, and that's going to really, really, really increase the speed of our pages. So that should give us a huge additional boost. We've also engaged you on an ongoing basis, so we're going to be really improving our backlinks and our trust and authority in the space. And you've been giving us great advice along the way. So we're pretty fired up for what's about to happen for our project.
That is awesome. And what were the big objections or concerns that you had or the team had before you pushed the button to work with me?
Yeah, I think we have, as I mentioned, we've engaged other SEO consultants before with very limited results. So I think generally there is skepticism around bringing in outside experts that are going to give us advice that, we already know a lot of that stuff because people have given it to us before and we've implemented it, and, it doesn't really do anything. So at first there was that skepticism. It is also a premium service, and we have funds, but we're very frugal. We're very intentional with how we use our money. We really look to spend money in a way that delivers ROI to us. And with SEO, it's challenging to determine the ROI, especially because we're not, as I mentioned before, we're not serving ads. We're not selling our visitors' data. We're not actually directly monetizing our users. And so even that, it's a little bit of like, what's going to be the direct ROI from even doubling our users? It's a little bit less clear to us. And then I think those probably were the two things. And then, as I mentioned, after that first conversation with you, it just became apparent that you had a lot of very specific knowledge that was not the sort of foofy general SEO advice that we got, but instead was like very specific. Here's how Google actually thinks about these things. Here are some changes that have been that Google has made to their policies that are going to change that are going to impact the way that you should actually implement these things. And yeah, so
Awesome. And what would be an example of something that was very surprising and maybe even counterintuitive that you learned from me that you guys were able to capitalize on?
So one thing that I guess one thing that's interesting with Everipedia is that we started as a fork of Wikipedia, and so a lot of our content is not original. It makes our encyclopedia robust, and it makes it so when you're on Everipedia, if you search for a topic, or you click on internal link within an article, you are brought to whatever that knowledge base is within Everipedia, but we don't really count that as proprietary Everipedia content. And so we have that. We also have a lot of content that is thin. It's one sentence, two sentences. It makes it so that we have a robust knowledge base, but those pages just aren't that valuable to us, as you explained. So, I think the way that we thought about those pages, whether we index them, how we deal with internal linking, how link juice is actually preserved within a site. So, one of the things that you pointed out to us is that, as I mentioned, the homepage has the most link juice, right? Where anything that is linked to from the homepage is going to get, let's say it's 70% of the link juice from the homepage, and then whatever's linked to from there, it gets further diluted. But the farther away from the homepage you get, the share of link juice gets dissipated. But there's an incredible value the closer you are to our homepage. And so structuring our site in general to not waste that link juice. So something, for example, that's linked to from the homepage that has a lot of internal links, where maybe 90% of them are to Wikipedia imports, which we don't index, right? Google doesn't even see those pages because they're just duplicate content of Wikipedia. Instead of linking to those internally, we now are doing something much more sophisticated where they're not actually internal links for Google purposes. So the Google crawler is going to our homepage. It's looking at the different content we have featured there. It's going to those, and then it's only seeing links on those pages that are our actual own proprietary content, rather than everything that might be a Wikipedia import, that might be not indexed, that sort of stuff. And so we're preserving that link juice and really directing it very intentionally to our content, to our unique value proposition, essentially. And so that was kind of counterintuitive. We knew that we shouldn't be indexing that stuff, but the whole idea of link juice and how to spread that around and internally structure our site was something that we just hadn't really thought of. And I think that has been a massive game changer. I mean, again, there was a list of 60 different things that we did, so there's been a lot of different game changers, but that one was huge.
Yeah, and one distinction I think that was completely new to you guys related to this is that all that Wikipedia import content, you were preserving crawl budget by not allowing the spiders to crawl those pages. But what wasn't happening was this understanding of index budget being a separate thing, and that's the thing that you need to be more careful about preserving and being more frugal about than crawl budget. And this idea that you're only given a certain amount of budget to spend depending on how important, authoritative, trusted your website is and a bunch of other factors. So the crawl budget is really only applicable for a very large website. You guys qualify because you've got millions of pages. And so crawl budget, you want to be thoughtful about how you're sending Googlebot around in your site. But even more important is this idea of index budget. So index budget is that you have only a certain amount of equity that you are able to spend with Google because it's more expensive to store the data in its massive distributed database, the index, than it is to crawl a page multiple times a month. So that's where the magic comes in. Like, all right, so let's think differently about how we are going to direct Google around in the site in terms of spending our link equity, our page rank. You know, how are we going to pass internal link equity around? How are we going to stop squandering index budget when we're trying to preserve crawl budget, which isn't as valuable and as important to us as index budget? You know, we're getting pages that are still showing up in the index, even though we're stopping Googlebot from crawling them with disallows. So all that sort of stuff was, I think, pretty new for you guys, right?
Yeah, we generally knew that we were no indexing our Wikipedia content, and I think we were not no indexing our thin content. So that one was huge. I think we generally knew about some of the stuff around indexing, but you added a lot of clarity to that, and I think the number of pages that we actually have indexed officially by Google in our Search Console is, I forget the exact number, but we dropped it by like 30% or something after engaging you, to really say to Google, look, these are the pages that are valuable, that are high quality, that you should be indexing, and that we actually want to spend our equity on. I actually just today increased the threshold, the requirements for being indexed in terms of quality of a page. So, our whole mentality around budgets, Google budgets has shifted, and we're much more pragmatic about how we're spending our crawl, our index budgets, those sorts of things. And yeah, I would say the other massive one for us, we always knew that we should have categorization within the site, but we had been sort of slow to move on that. And one of the big issues that you identified is that most of our pages were just orphans. There was no way for Google to find them, essentially. And so, we'd have a page that we created and it was deployed, and then so what? There's nothing linking to it. And so it just exists, and Google has no idea, and it considers it largely immaterial and unimportant because nothing's linking to it. So we went through a huge process of categorizing all of our content. We added categories to each of our pages, and then those category links went to massive lists of categories of different content ranked by page views. And so now we essentially have like a whole internal index of all of our content. Anything that is created gets categories added to it, immediately shows up on those category pages. And so Google now has a sense of where all of our content is. We have lots of different categories. We have category pages that are indexed. And I think that's also had an incredible impact for us.
Yeah, very cool. And I think I had shared this example with you guys. In fact, I'm sure I had, of New York Times has these topic pages, and they do really well. Like the Iraq topic page in the New York Times website ranks on page 1 for Iraq.
Yeah.
And it's not the most valuable page out there by a stretch about Iraq. It's just there's so much authority and trust that the New York Times has, as far as Google sees it, that just by having a topic page, which is a little bit more advanced than a category page, but it's still pretty much the same concept. And a little known growth hack, let's call it, for Wikipedia, if you want to get a Wikipedia article to rank higher or lower, this also works conversely. It's the categories that page is in. Because, yeah, Wikipedia no follows all external links, but internal links are not getting no followed. So if you want to send more or less juice to a Wikipedia article, the categories are the massive secret way to do that. Right? So, my page in Wikipedia is not ranking as well as I'd like it to rank. Let's give it some juice. And what's one of the most powerful sites that you can link to that page from? Wikipedia itself, right? So just put it in more categories, relevant categories, of course. But yeah, and similarly, you can remove categories and have it lower in the search results. Like, oh my gosh, my Wikipedia article is outranking my homepage. That's not good. Let's fix that. Let's decategorize some of the categories that Wikipedia article's in. So yeah, so much cool stuff that you can do once you really understand the nuances of SEO. Yeah. So your traffic levels have increased significantly. higher than you had anticipated. Is that an accurate assessment from
I
your
think,
from what?
yeah, yeah. I think the traffic has grown much faster than I anticipated. That's what I've been really impressed with. Is my impression was that SEO takes 3 or 4 months for a change. From when you make a change for it to actually have any impact, that it takes 3 or 4 months. I think what we found is that certain changes had an impact, within a week even. I think it's probably true that many of the changes will have a longer tail on their impact. I think even things like link building and trust and authority, those probably change much slower. But
Right.
I think the things around index budget and crawl budget and internal linking, discoverability, all of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, you can even
Content pruning.
content printing. You can look on your search console and see the impact, and tools like Ahrefs and things like that. You can actually see the impact, and it's remarkably fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's been really exciting. And
Yeah, and conventional wisdom has been that to give it 4 months to a year for SEO changes to really have an impact. That's even from Google engineers. Like Miley Oye has a Google Webmaster video where this Google engineer, this representative of Google, saying officially, essentially, hey, give SEO time because it takes time. 4 months to a year is pretty typical.
And the fact that we've doubled in 2 months, which is less than any of them say, has me pretty optimistic about what's going to happen over the 4 months to a year. Because some of the changes likely will start having impact in a month or in 2 months or 5 months from now. And I think as you've said to us many times, SEO is not something you just do and then stop. It's an ongoing battle. And so, and we're engaged in that, and we are going to continue our efforts. So the things that we've done, over the last 2 months will start having an impact in 3 months, but then the things we're doing today will also have an impact. And, I'm excited. It feels like a big game. The whole thing feels very gamified to me right now. So it's fun to have success in a gamification system.
Yeah. Well, your website is kind of a game too. Like you've gamified the process of contributing to a massive knowledge base, massive global encyclopedia, which is pretty darn cool.
Absolutely. We're fired up.
Yeah. So one of the things that you had said when you were interested in engaging for a longer term contract with me was that you were impressed with the results so far and all that. And actually, would you mind if I shared a little bit of that email where you had kind of said some really nice things?
I don't even remember what I said, but feel free. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, awesome. So let me pull that up. Okay, so based on the organic traffic growth we've experienced, our SEO collaboration seems to have been successful. Our organic traffic has nearly tripled since the beginning of our engagement, and we're still working on perfecting and then deploying server-side rendering, which will dramatically improve our page load speed, as you had mentioned. We're interested in adding fuel to the fire and continuing our collaboration with you. You've demonstrated to us a mastery of SEO, and given how important organic traffic is to our success, we'd be interested in escalating our relationship. And then you went into some specifics, which I'll leave out. So that was very exciting to see and to hear the kind of success that you are already achieving. And if our listener wanted to take one thing away from this whole conversation about what they can do to apply something from the realm of SEO that would make a game-changing difference to their business, and they might be in a completely different business from yours, what would you tell them to do?
Oh man, there's so many different things. But yeah, I would say, to think about Google Bot as an algorithm that has certain constraints, and if you figure out what those constraints are and certain rules that govern it, if you can figure out some of them, then you can have huge impact. I think hiring Stefan, is a great move, but there's also a lot of like low hanging fruit that if you don't have the budget for that, that you can do. I think Stefan, you've also published a lot of stuff in your podcasts and your writing. You do just give out nuggets, and even the stuff that we've been talking about. Thinking about Googlebot as having budgets for indexing and crawling, for needing discoverability, your orphan pages that have nothing linking to them. That's really important to understand that even internal linking, where you spread link juice from your homepage, from whatever your highest SEO pages to other pages, that's incredibly important. And generally just thinking about the Googlebot as sophisticated algorithmic game that has rules that govern it that are changing, right? So some of the hard stuff with SEO is knowing what has changed, what is current. Because if you read an SEO article from 2 years ago, the advice that it gives may just not be relevant anymore because it's constantly being tweaked. I think that's where an expert that actually knows what's happening and stays abreast of the changes can be incredibly valuable and unique. You just can't find that knowledge out there. So I would say read the most robust SEO stuff you can, or the most informed that you can. If it's old, take it with a grain of salt. Maybe try to read something that's new as well. And then I think there also are a lot of SEO people out there that don't really know what they're talking about. And I think that it's hard to discern between good SEO advice and bad SEO advice. It's actually very easy to make it up and seem like you know what you're talking about, which I think a lot of people do. So try as hard as you can to find trusted knowledge sources for SEO. And there are definitely very smart people around SEO out there. Stefan is absolutely one of them. So if you can read anything by him or engage him, you should definitely go for it.
Thank you, Daniel. And for our listener who wants to either hire an SEO or engage an agency or whatever, and they want to make sure they don't get snowed or like just sold a bill of goods, essentially, I do have an SEO BS detector that's available for free on my website. It has a bunch of trick questions with the correct answers, the one and only correct answer for each one that you can slip into the interview process. So even without having SEO knowledge or expertise, you can, with that little document, ensure you don't get a charlatan on your payroll. So that's on stefanspencer.com/resources. So if our listener wants to follow you, Daniel, where's the best place? Like, where are you most active on social media? And do you have a website we can send folks to as well?
Yeah, I would say you can follow me personally on Twitter. Twitter.com/DLiebeskind, which is DLIEBESKIND. We probably can put a link after.
Yep.
And then, check out Everipedia as well, Everipedia.org. And to see the stuff that we're doing, it's very exciting. There's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of SEO improvements. So if you want to, see SEO being implemented real time, definitely check that out. And you can also reach out to me if you want, specifically Daniel@Everipedia.org. Feel free. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, listener. I hope you got some valuable takeaways from this. I'm sure you did. So now it's up to you to actually implement. So we'll catch you on the next episode of Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stefan Spencer, signing off.